is now the public education system across the United States. So every public school system that exists got their basis from what was already happening here in Macon County. So they had not only all of the black medical establishment was here. They had a hospital here, so they had facilities. They had the intellectual power to actually follow the research protocol with fidelity so that it would be accepted that whatever the findings were could be compared to the Oslo story and demonstrate that what happened with this disease in white people is the same for black people. So that's why Macon County was chosen, not because they were poor, uneducated, or rural. Now, please understand, there were some classism issues here. Because you do know that all the time that this study was going on between 1932 and 1972, this was not a secret. That's another myth that's out there. This was not a secret. This was not something that was done covertly. There were publications in national medical journals throughout this study. There were black physicians that were participating in, and none of them protested. Even when syphilis became the acceptable treatment regimen, not only were they not given penicillin, they were actively kept from it. So they were not allowed to join the military if you were part of the study, because you would have got treatment, you would have got penicillin as a part of your intake, and you would have been removed from the study. They also sent a list around to local physicians all over the state and in Georgia to let people know that the men, if any of the men that were on this list came to you for treatment, you are not to give them penicillin. Also very unfair. So, although when it began, it was not, it was actually, I had an opportunity to see some of the original documents from CDC that were written by the project officers that were in charge of the study. It was really, they really thought that this would go on for a few months, maybe a year, and then they'll get more money. That's why they were publishing. They thought more people will give them money so they can start to do treatment regimens again. But actually people got more interested in the data and more interested in how being able to demonstrate the difference between the ethnicities than the actual treatment or the benefit to the participants. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not very familiar with the history of it, but because it was a study conducted by African Americans on African Americans, how did the white community receive the data even though it was actual data?
Well, first of all, it was commissioned and the protocol was established by the United States government, CDC. So that information was published by CDC and Tuskegee physicians together. They had joint publications in national medical journals as well as CDC publications throughout the study. And so the white establishment learned about this because all physicians received publications from the Centers for Disease Control, especially around notifiable diseases like STDs. So this data was readily available and well published.
So I guess my question is, yes, the CDC backed it. Did the white community accept it?
You mean accept the
data that
The data.
that's at the
Absolutely. It is actually still considered to this day one of the most successful prospective studies ever conducted by the CDC. Because it had the highest percentage of follow-up, the lowest percentage of loss of participants during the study period. So when you look at an epidemiological study in this framework, and you compare it to other studies that were conducted during that time, and still, it had some of the best, the methodology and the statistics in regards to how they followed them and the way they actually got them to come back and to do the annual checkups. It has not been able to be replicated in any other state. And that's mostly because of the black nurses that were here. They were in the community. They went to church with these individuals. They did roundups at the church. They went out to the local farms where a lot of these men were working to actually bring them in. They had a bus, if you will. They would bring them in for them to get their annual checkups and for them to do their annual reviews each year. Is there another question over here? Nope. So, the study ended not when anybody from the medical community or the research community said, hey, I think it's not a good idea. It was when this information was leaked to the popular press in the mid-70s. So what was going on in American history in the 70s? Civil rights movement. You had the Black Panther Party. You had many of the social organizations that have been developed for the advancement of black people that once it hit the popular press, there was a lot of outrage, not just from the black community, but from white communities. It was a white reporter working in the LA area that actually published this in the newspaper. It was a newspaper article. Now, the information that he used to write his article was supplied by some black epidemiologists that were working within the CDC at the time, who felt like this study was inappropriate, and they wanted to get the word out to the community to get support, to get it to him. And maybe if we're lucky, actually the person that supplied information to this reporter is still living. He actually ended up being in charge of follow-up of the men after the study was ended and made sure that they received the best medical care the U.S. government provides after the study ended, as well as their families until the last participant passed away. He was over that follow-up within the CDC. He actually is retired and in the Atlanta area, and I have spoken to him, and hopefully we can get him in to talk to you about his experience and his perspective. 8 o'clock in the morning is a little early. So I'll work on it. It may be something we have to record and I can show you. But there are clear violations of Nuremberg Code and Helsinki Declaration that we just talked about in what happened here in Tuskegee. But the United States never went before a federal court, right? We never allowed ourselves to be subject to the international community's scrutiny about this thing. And that's one of the major laws that, in practicing federal law, I had a hard time getting people to understand, is that in the United States has to give you permission to sue it when it does wrong. And most times they're not giving you that.
What?
Yes.
Come on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you really surprise you? What?
The United States government has to give you permission to sue it. Yes.
Who oversees that?
There's this whole checks and balances thing.
The executive branch oversees the execution of,
The crazy.
That one, the crazy.
well, I mean, it's not just him, it didn't start with him, that particular piece. But it is not, our Constitution has been interpreted that the federal government has to allow even individuals to sue it. Okay? That's probably way more law than we need, but that's kind of one of the reasons. And it's also, we have a really good reputation of do as I say, not as I do. So, what are HeLa cells?
Hero sales are sales that came from Henrietta Lacks, which was a woman, an African American woman who was diagnosed with cancer, but around the time they were trying to create cells that would grow so that they can use them for different studies, but they had no success, like the cells would die. So when they took like a biopsy from her, the doctor found out that her cells were growing, but they never informed her they were using her cells to grow. So they continued to use her cells and grow them, and even to this day, we still have some of her cells.
So I was watching HBO.
And she wasn't informed. She never got like people made lots of money off of her cells. She never got any of the money or anything like that, and she never knew that her cells were growing. Like her family found out later.
Very good. Henrietta Lacks was African American woman in the Baltimore, Maryland area. She was receiving treatment from a physician from Johns Hopkins University. And she did have a biopsy of her cervix conducted. They did tell her that she had cancer, and the treatment back then was horrendous, just for everybody. Not just for African Americans, but the known treatment regimen at that time was horrendous. And so she suffered a very painful time while she was in treatment, and she died at the age of 31. This is Miss Henrietta Lacks. Her cells are immortal cells. They do not die in vitro. They are considered the most important cell line in biomedical research even to this day. It is her cells and the information that was learned from her cells that is the basis for cloning and a lot of other things that have been considered major biomedical discoveries have come from studying in the use of HeLa cells. She never consented to having her cells harvested in the first place. She didn't understand that. She thought they were just being tested so she could find out what she had and what her problem was. Nobody said that her cells would be used for research purposes. Her family was never told that her cells were being used and that a financial benefit was being, of course, once they realized that they were able to replicate those cells, Johns Hopkins made millions and millions and possibly even billions of dollars of selling those cells to other research laboratories so that they can also conduct scientific discovery using these immortal cells. It is considered the gold standard in cell lines. So if anybody's doing any basic research, they usually have HeLa cells in their laboratory. Now, recently there was a movie that was, there's a book and a movie, and her family did receive financial benefit from that. But they have never, to this day, been able to receive any financial gain from the sale and use of her actual biological cells. Was there a question? Okay. Yes.
How's that justified?
How's that justified? When you sign your little informed consent forms, do anybody ever read the whole thing? Absolutely, positively not. You're like, okay, what time I served you again?
Call that lawyer.
So the question is, does this still happen? Absolutely it does. It depends upon the research, the institution that you go to. If you go to a research intensive hospital for your care, you better believe that in your form consent somewhere they're gonna say that anything that is extracted from you can and may be used in scientific discovery because you're at a research institution, and you're not going to receive any financial benefit from it. It was, even though they tried to sue Johns Hopkins, again, that's still no law, even in our ethical standards now, that says that you are protected, that your biological fluids or products are protected from research once they are removed from your body.
If you see something in one of your terms and conditions paper agreement thing, and you disagree with it, can you cross it out and say, this is what I agree to, and sign that?
You can cross it out, and initially the question is whether or not you'll get service at that institution. you absolutely can and should. Because just like you don't read it, most of them don't read it once you get checked for it.
So then I cancel.
Was there another question about Ms. Eva?
I don't know.
Okay, so the Belmont report. This is one of the products that came out of the U.S. Public Health Service treatment of study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. Many people want to believe that actually nothing positive happened from the study. Now, there's a lot of bad stuff that happened. I absolutely I'm not at all trying to dispute that claim. But there were some positive things that have occurred since then. The Belmont report, the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research was drafted following the revelations of the study. Federal laws establish requiring institutional review boards for protection of human subjects and research. That's why you must have an IRB for any type of research that is conducted especially using federal dollars, but generally even using private funds. If you want that research to be accepted in the medical community, you're gonna have to show that you followed the protocols and that there were an IRB or an independent body that was looking at the ethical issues associated with it. The guiding principles for human research involves informed consent and respect for persons, assessing benefit of research versus risk beneficence, and clear guidelines for the fair selection of research subjects, justice. And that's, all of those things are ethical tenets that we now study in any ethical course, but they come out of the acceptance of the language in the Belmont report as a standard for how research should be conducted in the United States. These processes are overseen by the Office of Human Research Protections in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So, now we have the Nuremberg Codes, the Helsinki Declaration, and the Belmont report. Did something like Tuskegee happen again? Yeah? You think so?
Crazy things.
Well, you're absolutely right. It has happened again. On several occasions, even with all these things in place. There have been studies, especially when the HIV retroviral drugs were first being tested. There were violations to this because there was a cohort in New York that was actually using little children in the foster care system. Absolutely happen when we conduct research in lesser developed countries. We kind of forget about the rules. So it's incumbent upon you guys as a part of the research enterprise to be vigilant and to say something when you see it happening, because you will still have researchers who feel like they don't have to have an IRB approval. They don't really need to get informed consent. Or if they get informed consent, they're not really letting the participants know that they're not going to get the benefit they think. Now, understanding, when you have a case control study, even with informed consent, even letting participants know that they may or may not get the actual active drug that's being tested, they may get a placebo. Some people will still absolutely believe that they're being treated. So you cannot, it's never going to be 100% because some people are going to believe because of their faith or whatever it is that their embedded theologies are that, oh, I know that I'm getting the active drug. I'm not getting a placebo. And I know I'm getting better. And that's why you have the placebo effect in studies. Is because the attitude of some of the participants will actually make them feel like they're feeling better. Or they're getting better. Or it could be that the drug really ain't doing that much difference in the two different populations. But it's incumbent upon you to do everything that you can to make sure that consent is informed. So if you're dealing with populations that English is their second language, then you need to make sure it's translated into their first language. If you're dealing with especially dealing with children, you need to make sure that the parents understand. And when you're dealing with even more vulnerable population, that's people that are in our penal system. That's why you can say that they have a choice, if the warden is getting so much money for the people to participate, or if you, usually in these studies, participants are given some monetary, their benefit may be monetary because they don't know whether or not they're actually getting the active drug, they may be getting $50. If you're in the penal system and nobody put money on you, well, $50 is a whole bunch of money. So is that really a choice you got? And if you're not gonna have access to this money, if you decide that you wanna get out of the study, do you have a real choice there if you don't have any other options for getting income inside that system? So those are kind of things that you have to think about when you're dealing with vulnerable populations, elderly. When you go to a church and everybody that's in the women's group is doing the study, are you making sure that these women clearly understand what the pros and cons are of being involved or not being involved? So as researchers, those are things that you have to make sure that the research protocols that you're involved with take those appropriate steps. So what about animals in research? 1966, around the same time, we decided we need to take care of all of this in the research enterprise. There was an Animal Welfare Act, also known as the Laboratory Animal Welfare Act. It is periodically amended. It is overseen by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the Animal Plant Inspection Service, or APHIS. Some of you may or have or may in the future intern or go to work with them. Most of the work that you do will be governed by the Animal Welfare Act. It's the only federal law in the United States that regulates the treatment of animals